So if we look at this island here, you might say, well, that's a nice looking island. It has a nice beach. It'd be a nice place for me to relax on. But what if I told you there was nobody there with you and there was no food or water and nobody was coming to help you? It might not be such a great place to be, right? And that's what island reversals are. A lot of times they're not a great place to be, but they can be a very strong indicator to show what's going to happen next. So they're rare, they rarely occur, but when they do, they're a very, very strong indicator and could provide a great opportunity. So if you see an island reversal, you really want to pay attention to it. And kind of what they are is it's an exhaustion gap, where it's been exhausted, as we learned about, and it's going to have this gap followed immediately by a breakaway gap in the opposite direction the next day. So what you're finding is that whichever way it's going, that breakaway gap the next day, you're finding a last trader kind of finds they're on an island, by themselves, and they have to start adjusting their price either up or down to kind of get back in step with people who are willing to buy and sell or trade with them, and are basically looking at maybe a different way the trend is going to go. So let's take a look at these island reversals and how to recognize them in a more understandable graphic manner. So to identify these island reversals, you're going to need an exhaustion gap, right? And so we know from day 14 to day 15 that we were looking at an exhaustion gap. We saw that our volume was not going up. They should have had a real spike in volume there. It actually went down in terms of our volume between day 14 and 15. And so we know we're running out of steam, and that is our exhaustion gap. And then what typically will happen is you'll now start seeing overlapping bars, and it might start going sideways, might even start going down, or basically the trend has been basically broken at this point, and it's not trending upward anymore, as in this example. But sometimes what happens is the island reversal, as we mentioned, you have an exhaustion gap that is immediately followed. It's immediately followed by a big jump up in price, that looks like it's another runaway gap. The classic way to define that, it would be the next day, as far as there being a true island reversal. Sometimes folks will say, oh, you might have one or two trading periods in between, but really the classic way to look at it is between, like in this example, 15 and 16, you're going to have these two kind of back-to-back gaps. So you have your exhaustion gap, low volume, and then all of a sudden it just keeps going up higher. There's a whole nother big gap, let's try to push this even higher, and that's where you might see even lower volume, let's say coming on, that bar in between those volume bars, where you could see even lower volume because it really is truly exhausted. You're really on an island. You're the last person out there trying to buy, and you might have a couple of sellers out there, but it's really already post the exhaustion phase. And really where you can tell is you can start looking for that low volume on that exhaustion gap, right? So there's low volume, and that tells you it's time to sell. If there's high volume on a runaway gap, that tells you to buy, right? We saw a previous, on day 12, that runaway gap where it's time to buy. But a low volume island reversal is you're going to have that low volume on the day 16 in this example. And then the time to sell or buy depends on the island, right? You're waiting for the island to form. So we don't really truly know it on day 16. We need a day 17 to show what's going to happen. And then what'll happen is then on day 17, there's going to be some high volume is when you can see you got your island reversal. You've got these low volume days of exhaustion gaps, and the island forming, and then the reversal going the opposite way is happening where there's a lot of volume and it's going to go the other way. So the time to sell or buy depends on the island, as I mentioned. So if we look on the left here, you can see that this was an upward trend that was exhausted, then jumped up from day 15 to 16 to an island. And then we're waiting to see what happens on day 17, and that's really what's going to confirm that we're on an island, that it didn't continue going up or something like that, where it might have actually been more of a runaway gap. It was actually a true island, after an exhaustion. And you can see how now prices have come down and there's another gap in between, but a lot of volume. Now people are really selling and they're trying to get out of it. That's the example on the left side. So that's now created a new downward trend on an island reversal. So it's time to sell, get out, book the profits that we've made from day 1 through 16, if we're staying the whole time, or 14, or however we've stayed along. But if we're in this security right now, we'd want to get out, right? By the same token, if you look on the other side, where if you look at day 13, 14, 15, things have been downtrending, right? We haven't bought yet because it's in a downtrend. There's an exhaustion gap from a previous, runaway gaps and breakaway gaps that have led to a strong trend going downward. Prices are going down. We see the exhaustion gap between day 14 and 15. We see day 16 following that exhaustion gap going out by itself on an island. We're going to watch to see what happens on day 17. What happens on day 17? The price goes back up significantly. We see that high volume. We see that we have an island reversal, but actually it's going in the other direction, and we want to buy on that. Now we're seeing a new upward trend that is forming, and so this would be a great buy signal, kind of confirming with that volume that we have an island reversal going in the other direction. So the key points is you don't know if it's an island until the second gap occurs. It's day 17 in this example. You might see it jump out way ahead after an exhaustion gap and kind of guess like, oh, is that a reversal? And it could be, but you really need to look at that volume, and you really need to confirm with that the following day. Others will guess based on the volume. Like if it's a low volume, they might say, oh, on day 16 our volume was low. And then we're going to guess and say that's an island reversal. And that's not a bad guess, actually, but to be a true island reversal, you're going to need that day 17 in this example. See, there's high volume there that really establish that, yes, things have changed. There's a definite change, and now a new trend is forming. So to really look at a classic completed island, you'll have to have an exhaustion gap with low volume, followed by an island gap with low volume, and in a sense, a breakaway gap, high volume, going in the opposite direction, forming that island. And you don't want to be on the island. You want to get either off the island or get on the new trend, depending which way it's headed. So those are island reversals. They're actually very rare occurrences, but if you see it and you kind of recognize it in a chart pattern, really watch that closely, because they are very, very strong indicators, probably because they are so rare and there's so many requirements behind it, right, with the exhaustion gap, all that coming in, the strong trends coming beforehand, either up or down. So watch for island reversals and be ready to strike. Nothing's perfect, of course, but this is a good, strong indicator. And do check those volume levels to kind of confirm what you're seeing is what's truly happening.